got quite a few people on already, so we'll get started. Thank you for joining the webinar today. My name's Kieran. I'm a member of the PPC. So today we're going to be taking you through RA56. We've got 45 minutes. Bushra is going to start off with a brief introduction on why we're holding the webinar and what a readiness assessment is. I'll then describe our approach to this readiness assessment and walk through the questions. So just to say, we have got quite a few questions included in this readiness assessment, a total of 81. So because these have been shared to you in advance, I won't read out every single question, but we will walk through them and they'll all be on the slides. And then we'll open it up at the end for Q&A. So for the Q&A, please submit your questions to the Slido. We've got the code here and it will be on each of the slides. As I said, please submit during the webinar and then we've got dedicated time at the end once we've walked through all of the questions. Right, Bushra, I'll hand over to you for this one.
Great. Should we move on to the intro slide?
Yeah, can you see it?
No, and I don't think participants saw the code either for Slido because we're still on the cover slide.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I can see it on my screen.
There's a problem on the display. You can't see the presentation.
Has it not moved on from the first slide? No, okay. That's interesting. Okay, let me try again.
I think it has for some participants, but not for everyone.
Oh, interesting.
Let's share again and see if that works.
Let's try that again then.
Yeah, that's worked for me.
Yeah?
Yeah, but it's not
Okay.
the slide. Oh, there it is. There it is.
There
Right,
it is. That's the code.
Yeah.
There's your Slido code. I'll just leave that up for a second.
Yeah,
Great,
let's
lots
leave
of
it for a
thumbs up.
minute.
Thank you. Okay, right. Bushra, over to you.
And the slides were sent out. Thank you, Kieran. The slides were sent out to everybody on Tuesday as well. So thank you, Kieran. I'll just quickly introduce myself. Hi, everybody. I'm Bushra Ali. I lead the PPC workstream. Thank you very much. Great turnout. We've got 138 participants online with us. We will be sending you Readiness Assessment 5 and 6 on the 28th of April. And you will have until the 16th of May to complete it and return it to the PPC. The purpose of this webinar, as Kieran has mentioned, is to share more information about the scope and the process for RA5 and 6, to walk through the questions with you today, and obviously to give you the opportunity to clarify and ask any questions that you have as we prepare to issue it at the end of the month. So before I hand back to Kieran, I just wanted to say a few things on why readiness assessments are important and how they help us. Firstly, they are an opportunity for participants to formally share their progress with us and highlight the areas where you need support from the programme. So they're very important for that. They're a really important tool for the programme to gather evidence on participant readiness in the areas that we deem to be the most critical. They help us identify where the key risks are and to work with participants to mitigate those risks. And the readiness assessment this year will be a really important input into our decision making for M10. Readiness assessments are also, as most of you will know, you have a regulatory obligation under the BSc to respond to this readiness assessment. Also, just want to note that software providers, whilst not a party to the BSc, so therefore not obligated to respond, we are asking software providers to respond because we find those responses helpful as they supplement the information that we obtain from your clients. And just a very final kind of quick note to say that we will be reporting to PSG in the coming weeks and months on which participants have responded and those that haven't. And for now, that's everything from me. Over to you.
Thanks, Bushra. Okay, right. I'll just spend the next couple of minutes going through the approach and scope and timelines for RA56. So, as Bushra said, the overall purpose of the readiness assessment is to enable the programme to have an accurate view of participants' readiness and allow us to make data-driven decisions, particularly in relation to milestones and control points. So RA56 will be a critical input and evidence capturing mechanism to inform and support wider M10 readiness tracking activity. So the RA56 is an activity that will run from April and will provide information and feed into the M10 checkpoint reporting for the July PSG. So you will probably know by now that RA56 will be covering milestones M10 and M11, so central systems ready for migrating MPANs and initiation of migration of MPANs, as well as any prerequisites for M10. It will also provide input into control points 3 and 4, which is around readiness for the start of migration. And the questions that we've developed for this readiness assessment are all based on the activities referenced in the M10, M11 cutover plan and M10 acceptance criteria. So the objective of RA56 is to input into and inform wider go-live readiness tracking activity and decision making. It will help us to identify any risks or issues in advance of go-live, and that will then allow us to trigger targeted assurance activity with participants to understand and manage any risks or issues. And we would ask you to secure director level sign-off to encourage ownership and accountability. So how will RA56 be delivered? So as per previous readiness assessments, the PPC will develop and issue a self-assessment survey. We will be sending out an email with a link to an MS Forms that we'll ask you to complete. Questions will be based on the critical activities that participants will be required to carry out in the lead up to M10 and M11. The questions will ask for answers in a variety of formats and be tailored to the different participant groups. So whilst there are a lot more questions contained in this readiness assessment, there's also more categories of participants. So not all questions will be applicable to all participants, and we set that out in the survey. But participants with more than one role in the programme will be required to complete RA56 for each of their roles. And then individual and overall readiness reports will be produced by the PPC. So now I'll just move on to the scope of the survey. So as I said, we've taken the activity set out in the cutover plan and used those to inform the survey. So the first topic is around qualification. So that's readiness activities of SIT participants and non-SIT LDSOs for qualification and service activation, and also qualification preparation for supplier and agent qualification. Performance assurance, so this is ensuring that all relevant parties have the correct performance assurance processes in place. Data cleanse activities to ensure that responsible parties are undergoing the right data cleanse activities ahead of M10. Participant migration start and early life support ready, so reviewing the readiness of participants for the start of migration, levels of understanding and any support requirements for the early life support model. Market-wide participant MHHS supporting functionality ready. So this is around the readiness of suppliers and agents to implement specific changes prior to the start of the migration period to support forward and reverse migration processes, as well as the new connections processes. Cutover planning, this is around readiness to deploy new systems or enable new functionality. DIP readiness, so that's readiness of the new system and deployment into the production environment. Elexon Central Services deployment, so this is aimed at Elexon and that's around their preparations to deploy several new central systems to production. Service management go live, so that's readiness to operate and support new service management arrangements. Central services deployment of new functionality, preparation for a number of activities are set out there. Code body readiness, so these are all questions for the code bodies to confirm that all code body led activities in the lead up to M10 are on track. consequential change. So these are questions that have been provided by the IPA to assess the status of progress of consequential changes. And then comms and engagement, and we always include this in our readiness assessment to understand the levels of comms and engagement support that you're receiving and any feedback. On to the timeline now. So today we're doing the webinar walkthrough where we'll run through all of the questions and take any Q&A. The readiness assessment will be issued to participants on the 28th of April, and you will have 3 weeks to respond, so that the survey will close on the 16th of May. Following that period, the team working with workstream leads, IPA code bodies and various others will conduct that data analysis and evidence reviews of all of the responses that we received. We will also factor into this time the potential for individual participant interviews but based on exception and based on a risk-based approach. We will then produce the readiness report, so that's overall report and individual reports, and they will be published on the 3rd of July. Right, so we'll dive into the questions now. As I said, I won't be reading out every question individually, but I'll provide a high-level summary so that you can get a feel for what each section includes. So the first section is on the administrative questions, which are standard for all of our RA surveys, just to get the details of your organisation, your constituency, and then your role in MHHS. The next set of questions are all around qualification. So we've got 12 questions in total, and they are regarding the quad, qualification testing, DIP onboarding, PIT testing, and these contain questions for a variety of participants, so SIT, non-SIT LDSOs, and then specific to participant waves. The next area is on performance assurance. So these are questions aimed at the code bodies and central parties, and they are asking questions around migration supporting functionality, performance assurance framework implementation, reporting arrangements, and then details of business continuity and disaster recovery plans. We then go on to data cleanse. So we've got 4 questions here, and they are aimed at the LDSOs, central party, SIT and non-SIT participants. And they are all around the data cleanse activities, the pre-migration data cleanse activities, data migration activities that are set out in the cutover plan or the data cleanse plan, and details of any work-off plans if you have not completed the exception resolution activities. We then have a number of questions on migration start and early life support ready. So this is really around understanding, getting a feel for your level of understanding of the early life support model, details of hypercare arrangements and migration plans, details around contracting arrangements you've made, checking that you've confirmed the delegated authority for engaging with the MCC and the migration tool that's called Kestrel, your understanding of the obligations of the migration framework, and any concerns in meeting thresholds for migration activity. The next section is on market-wide participant MHHS supporting functionality. And these questions are around forward and reverse migration processes, implementation plans and operational readiness plans, and systems and processes reflecting the new connections approach. And again, the audience here is a range of SIT, non-SIT participants, LDSOs, and 1 question for all participants. Moving on to cutover planning. So these questions are around understanding if your preparation activities are on track, timelines for production environments, and then service activation plans and processes. The next section is all around DIP readiness, and these questions are directed to Alexon as the DIP manager. So these questions are around timings of the production DIP portal, webhook registration processes, and DIP reporting. We then have a section on Alexon Central Services deployment. Again, these questions are all exclusive to Alexon, and they are around production ISD data and MDD data, migrating data from legacy MDD, the process for briefing the LDSOs, and details of a runbook for the deployment of several new central services systems. The next section is on service management go live. The majority of these questions are for Alexon, but there's a question for all participants and one that's also for central services, central parties and LDSOs. So these are around your understanding of the service management arrangements, the development of the new service management function and the operating model, and plans to engage with industry, and also the ability to resolve queries and issues from M10. This next section is on central services deployment of new functionality. There are 4 questions in this section, and they are for central parties, code bodies, and LDSOs. And we're asking questions around the DTS release, supporting the population of the domestic premises indicator, MPRS release 9, and the deployment of EES. Then we go on to the questions around code body readiness. So these are all questions for the code bodies. And these are around progress of the qualification submission and qualification timelines, how the programme will be receiving updates, timing regarding changes to industry codes, and then getting an understanding of PAB readiness. This next section is on consequential changes. As I said, these 4 questions have been submitted by the IPA, and they are around the completion of the impact assessments for internal systems, functionality and activities, progress and implementation plans, and timings for implementing consequential changes. And then finally, and then I'll hand over to you for Q&A. The last section is for all participants, and these are questions on comms and engagement. So your levels of satisfaction with our different comms channels. So for example, the collaboration base, the clock, the various webinars and open days, and also levels of support that you receive from the PPC. Right, okay, so that's I'm going to stop talking there and hand over to Max, who's been monitoring the Slido. Max, have we received any questions?
Thanks, Kieran. Yeah, I've had the Slido up in the background. I've been able to sort of group some of the questions, and people have been able to upvote as well. So one of the first questions is around director level sign-off. Questions been raised around, do we need it, and how will participants evidence that director level sign-off?
Yeah, Bushra, did you want to take that one?
I think it's one. Is this one for Jason to come in and help with?
I think we're going to have to take that one away.
Yeah,
I don't
please.
know what we did with the last one, to be honest, Bushra. I know that there are quite onerous processes for director sign-off at participants. So why don't we take that away and just be clear on what we're asking for and in what format. I know there's been a few questions in there, whether it's a company's house director, how you provide that sign-off. So let's go away and have a look at that and come back to you. One of the reasons for doing this webinar is to gather exactly these questions in advance before it actually gets distributed, because I know Colin's raised a question, do we have to wait until the 28th of April for the RFI? We wanted to make sure we had the opportunity to reflect on any questions from today and also the timing is designed to feed into some of the M10 checkpoint reporting as well in July. So I thought Max, I might just answer that while we were at it as well. Thanks, Chris. The reason I think we put director level sign off in there originally is because we're using it as part of our readiness assessment. But let's take that away, Chris and others, and we'll revert on that.
Thanks, Jason. There's also one in the chat and also been raised in the Slido as well around duplication of effort across different governance bodies and the same content in different formats by different governance forums. I don't know if you wanted to be able to sort of a bit more detail on that one, Jason.
I did whack War and Peace in the chat to try and answer Catherine's answer. I mean, I know we are asking for a lot of information. We are trying not to duplicate that information, and we are trying to be specific about what we're asking for in which body for what purpose. So the cutover plan, for example, which I know you referenced, Catherine, we will be providing some guidance notes on that through TORWIG and through that route. The GLIG is very much on operational readiness and mitigating against the risks around M10. And we are talking to Ofgem about, I know there was and there was quite a lot of feedback around the Ofgem directives and the directive that included the provision of a programme plan in there. So we're talking to Ofgem about that. Jenny Booth did brief in the PSG that the intent was not to duplicate and increase the burden on participants. So we are just talking to Ofgem about the best way we reflect that, because I think the intent was for Ofgem to provide more support to the programme to get the provision of information that we're asking for, rather than adding new requirements. So we will be picking that up with Ofgem next week. We've got a meeting in the diary on that.
Thank you, Jason. Just looking at the slide, another there's one that's been updated a few times around, will a list of the questions be issued as well, so we can circulate and collaborate internally on the surveys?
Yes, yeah, I think as per previous readiness assessments, we can also provide you with an Excel list of the questions so that you can work internally.
I can do this if we.
One of the intentions of doing the webinar today was to try and get those questions out to you in advance. I know we might tweak them a bit in between now and the actual release, but if we don't have substantial comments on those questions here, then I think you can largely take these as the basis for the questions that are going to go out, so you can prepare on the basis of the information we've been sharing today.
Yeah, so not to jump about a bit, because I think there's a related question I can see in Slido from quite a few participants about if the questions are ready now, why wait until the 28th of April, which I think is good feedback for us. I mean, as Jason has mentioned, and Karen as well, is we keep a gap between the webinar and when we issue. Sorry, could everybody please be on mute?
I'll have a look.
Thank you. We intentionally keep a gap between holding this webinar and issuing the survey, just so that you have time to understand what resources you need. But we can take this, I can see there's quite a few questions. We can take that back in and see if we can actually release Readiness Assessment 5 and 6 sooner, subject to obviously there being no changes after this to any of the questions.
And then basically just
thank you, Bushra. This one around what drives the risk-based interviews that we alluded to in the plan.
But Jason, we said we'd take a risk-based approach and ask for interviews if we feel that an interview was needed based on what we've seen in the Readiness Assessment submission.
Yes, that was the same approach we took last time. In the last Readiness Assessment, I think that question came in from Chris. You'll probably remember we didn't do any risk-based interviews last time around, and I think that we will be assessing the risks in the responses, but largely we will be feeding that in as our general programme assurance activities. I expect that any risk-based interviews would be the type of activity we'd be doing around assurance for operational readiness anyway. So I probably don't see this as additional readiness assessment activities. This will feed into our assurance for operational readiness. So yes, we may have risk-based interviews, but I think it will be on the basis of our assessment of readiness for go live and part of our M10 readiness assessment rather than any specific RA associated activity.
Thank you. There's one around clarifying what exactly is meant by cutover planning and which milestone it refers to, and will this differ between SIT and non-SIT participants?
We've got Matthew Breen on the call as well. Is that one for Matthew?
Thanks, Bushra. Yeah, so when we talk about cutover, we're talking about M10 and M11. But as Jason's mentioned, we'll be providing a bit more clarity on exactly what it is we're looking for from participants within their cutover plans through the transition working group. We'll be issuing some templates which set out kind of minimum set of requirements that we're expecting to see within each participant's cutover plan, along with some of the relevant key elements from the programme M10, M11 cutover plan as well. So that's something on the agenda for the tour in the coming weeks.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew. There's also one that's been raised around expectations for answers in the answer formats. I think where we've got a yes/no answer and also a yes/no plus free text. Is the free text mandatory alongside that yes/no answer?
I think it depends on what the question is, and we're still developing the survey, but it might be that if the answer is no, we ask you to provide a bit more detail in the free text just to provide us with a bit more depth around the answer. But it's not mandatory in every single question. It will depend on the question.
I think that then stems onto the next question. Is a question around what level of evidence is required for these questions. Will we need to upload any additional evidence?
I can take that. Where we do require additional evidence, for example, the plans that may be referenced, we will ask for that evidence to be submitted as part of the question. Jason, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I don't think so, Bushra. I think that's covered it.
Thank you. Just going through some more now. Just some more comments are coming in. So it's just a live thing. What is the submission expectation if we hold more than one role, a single submission or a submission per role? It's one that's been raised.
So the expectation which we will communicate with those participants that are impacted is if you hold more than one role, then we will ask for multiple submissions. We will separately reach out to those participants that need to do more than one submission.
There is different branching through the questions in the assessment. So I see the emojis. If we can combine it, we'll have a look at it, but it is quite difficult with the logic and the way that the forms run.
Yeah. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Jason. It's a question around what is expected from non-SIT parties for the questions on hypercare. It's not something delivered by central parties.
Is that Matthew?
Yeah, so when we talk about hypercare, what we're talking about is the arrangements that each central party, code body, but also programme participant will have in place to support when they begin operating in the MHHS arrangements and the resolution of any issues that may arise when they do that. So if we're talking about central parties, that will be in the period after they go live at M10 and M11. But then there will also be an expectation that they have some hypercare arrangements in place throughout the migration period to support any uptick in issues that we may see when additional parties become qualified. But similarly, for parties that are going through the qualification route, we would expect that they have their own hypercare arrangements in place that enable their organisation to mitigate any risk that may be associated to them operating with or beginning to operate within the MHHS arrangements. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thanks, Matthew. There's a question around there not appearing to be any software provider specific questions. Is this correct? And if it is, which questions are software providers expected to answer?
We've got all participant
We've got all
questions.
participants, yeah. So, for example, on this page, the all participants audience questions, we would expect software providers to answer those as well.
I think we might need to just go away and have a look at whether, you know, there are a number of software providers that are participating in SIT on behalf of their suppliers. So we might just want to have a quick check through some of that, Bushra, but I think in principle that is the right answer. Generally, they're role-based otherwise. If any of the software providers have got any thoughts on that to provide offline back into us, it'd be good to hear that. I know that's a generic question in Slido, so I'm looking down because I'm reading the Slido questions we're going. But if there are any specific concerns, it'd be good to have that offline. Thanks.
Thanks, Jason. There's one around, will you be setting out expected attainment criteria for each of the questions so it's clear what your expectations are, particularly given we're all at different stages of readiness across SIT and the 4 qualification waves?
Which one was that? Sorry, I'm looking for that. Looking for that one.
By Adam Isles.
Okay, sorry.
Sent at 12:30.
See it in there.
I wonder if is there anyone from qualification? I don't know whether Andrew Wallace is on the call.
Can you repeat the question, Max? Sorry, I can't see it on Slido.
Yeah, sure. Will you be setting out expected attainment criteria for each of the questions so it's clear what your expectations are, particularly given we're all at different stages of readiness across SIT and the 4 qualification waves?
I'm not quite sure what the attainment criteria might be against the specific question. So maybe if that came from Adam, maybe we just pick that up offline and have a look at it.
Yeah, Jason, I'm happy to discuss offline equally. I think in the past, certainly in other programs and earlier, I think in this program, we did the work attainment criteria cascaded with questions, so we knew what you were looking for in terms of levels of response and exactly where you expected parties to be. It's clear for a SIT party, right? Given how close we are to go live, what you're looking for right now, probably less clear for somebody who's in wave 3, wave 4 for some of the questions. Use that ELS questions as a good example. But you think it's going to be much more mature based upon the level of your readiness, I should imagine, and proximity to go live.
Okay, let's take that away, Adam.
We'll take it away. We'll have to have a think about that, Adam. Thank you for that.
I get the nature of the question now. Thank you.
One question around, will the TOR working group template be available prior to the closure of Readiness Assessment 5.6?
What was that, Max? A TOR working group?
Yeah.
I think that's for Matthew. I think that's the cutover plan description.
Sorry, Max. Could you repeat the question? I'm also struggling to follow. We've got so many questions through Slido.
Will the TOR working group template be available prior to the closure of RA 5.6?
I think that probably refers to the cutover plan guidance.
Yes, and yes, the expectation is yes that the templates will be out. We're planning to provide, as I mentioned, a little bit more detail on that in the toolbook that's coming up in a couple of weeks. So yes is the answer to that. The intention is that those templates will be out before this readiness assessment is completed.
One question around, can multiple people respond? I've lost the question now. can multiple people respond, amend from one organisation, or once you've started working it, can you save it?
Yes,
Okay, so technical question, Kieran. Yeah,
I think that's that's MS Forms functionality. You are able to save as you go along and then go back into it.
Thank you. Just going through, just updating. Which questions are expected to be answered by a supplier who's in the process of entering the market and doesn't have any live meter points?
Depends on which wave you're in for qualification. So the assumption is that you're a supplier who's coming through MHHS qualification. And if that's the case, you answer the questions that relate to suppliers and non-SIT suppliers, and those that apply to whichever wave you're coming into, for example, on this particular slide.
Thank you, Jason. For question 32, what do you mean by delegated authority?
Should Matthew Breen?
I think this might be a migration one actually. So this is around the user details that you have submitted to the MCC around use of the Kestrel tool and engaging with the MCC. Don't know if you've got Alf.
So hi Karen. So what we're after is that for managing the users in question in Kestrel, we need to make sure there's an accountable person, a single point of contact, who's responsible for allocating users from a particular organisation.
Thank you.
There's one question around we'll be able to attach supplementary documents and also checking for the word count within the forms, as people have had fun with adding large text commentary into MS Forms before.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether we've added word count limits previously, but I'd have to go away and check that. Where we are asking for an attachment or a specific piece of information, we do set it out in the question.
And you should be able to attach it.
Yeah, that should be fine.
There's questions around when will participants be able to get access to the Excel version of questions so they can start planning their responses ahead of 28th of April.
We would intend to send out the Excel at the same time as sending out the forms link with the questions, but kind of referencing our question earlier on, we'll take away whether we can do that any earlier.
If we've got no substantive comments on the questions themselves, or if we've got a few things that we can pick up on here, then I don't see a reason why we couldn't release it earlier. We've also had a couple of comments in there saying, if we do need director level sign off, and we will go away and check that might take more than 3 weeks once people have collated the comments and have to go through internal governance, and I get that too. So let's take that away, Kieran and Bushra, and see what we can do. I mean, at the very least, we might be able to. Would it be helpful to people if we shared this version now in an Excel format on the basis that it is a draft and
overwhelming? Yes,
we can definitely send that out after this webinar. I don't see why not. I just want a further point around releasing it earlier. Partly the other reason we've kept it on the 20th of April is to avoid the Easter holidays as well, and the school holidays.
If we keep the same deadline at the end, all we're doing is giving people more chance.
More time.
I don't think I've ever said anything that's been so popular in this program as that last statement.
There you go.
I'm going to bank that.
Yeah, we can get these questions into Excel and share them, and then once if there are any questions that are updated or tweaked, we will send around a revised version and highlight which ones we've changed.
Amazing. Thank you. Just sorry, I'm Kerry. I work for Good Energy. Yeah, I just wanted to point out because we are a very small supplier, so our resources are very, very limited, and we have a big work project going through the team at the moment. So we rely on a lot of the same resource. So anything that can be done to give us any advancement of upcoming RAs or anything else in that matter is really appreciated. So I tried to take screenshots of this as you were going through, but if you're going to send it out, that's even better.
So
yeah,
thank you, Kerry. You should have these slides. We sent them out on Tuesday. So the slides have the full question set in them, and as we've said, we'll pop this into an Excel file. And I think we can get that out to you by Monday.
That's perfect. We can manage expectations then.
No problem. But as Kieran says, just keep in mind that we might have to issue an updated Excel file if what's come through the webinar drives a change to any of the questions.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. It means that we can this will give us an indication of the teams and the resources that we need to engage with. So that's really helpful.
No problem.
Thank you.
We could if we can get that out in the next few days, then we could put a link to it in the clock as well. We can put it on the readiness assessment part of the website and maybe put something in the clock just to make people aware.
Yeah, sure.
I think not had any new questions coming in a while. I think that is the majority of them done by sort of grouping the main ones together. And I can see we're at time.
I think we've got.
So there's one question in the group.
Yeah. Sorry, there's a question that I posted that has a few votes. So if you don't mind, please. There's a few plans that have been mentioned in this. The migration plan, cutover plan, implementation plan, hypercare arrangement plans. Can a list be provided somewhere, please? And also, that would really help. And also, when the questions are of the type, are you aware of XYZ obligation? Can the questions refer to the specific documents where such obligation is captured, please?
And Claire, thank you for your question. Yeah, I understand where we're making a reference to an artifact or to something that's published, we can share the link to it as well. That's not a problem.
I did put I did put a comment in the chat around some of the plans, and Claire, and we have worded the readiness assessment quite carefully to try to avoid asking for plans, but to ask for confidence levels that you are able to comply with plans, because what we're trying not to do is ask for a whole load of information that we are probably not going to assess in reality what your readiness is against a big program plan, for example. It's a lot of the feedback that came back against the Ofgem directives. So we are trying to rationalise and ensure we're not asking for unreasonable things in the readiness assessment. But again, happy to take any comments on that.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks. I think that's everything from Slido Q&A.
Okay.
So we will be providing a written response to each of the questions after this webinar as well. So please do expect that from us.
Yeah, and we'll also upload this recording as well to the collaboration base for those who weren't able to join and to listen back on to the recording and also the FAQs document. So we've got a couple of actions to take away. Thank you for all of your questions. We will endeavour to get an Excel version of these questions out by early next week. But if you have any other questions in the meantime, please get in touch with the PPC. Thanks very much for joining, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank you. Bye.